Thanks for the sound check, Sean. We'll be starting here in just a minute. Yep, you've been called out. Okay, we're just going to get started here in just another minute or so. Give a little bit more time. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to High Noon at the Juice Shop, attacking single-page web applications at lovely noon Mountain Time, which is where I'm at in the Utah area. All right, so appreciate everybody signing in to catch this webcast. We're going to go ahead and dive right in to testing single-page web apps. So a little bit real quick before we get started about Paladin security. This is about the only advertising you get during this presentation. Basically, my name is Jason Wood. I'm the founder of Paladin Security. Perform penetration testing, training, and my primary goal is really to help clients meet their third-party security requirements around security testing. A lot of that's driven by experience of being a security engineer and being caught in client due diligence assessments and trying to deal with issues, ahead of time rather than during the middle of the client checking you out. So that's a little bit about Paladin Security. If you're interested in any of our service, just go ahead and drop me a line, and let's go ahead and just dive in. All right. So why am I doing this webcast in the first place? Primarily is because JavaScript single page web apps are becoming much more common, and they are a little bit of a pain in the neck to test. And the first time you get a hold of one, they they're more complex than you expect. Some of the behaviors that we're used to seeing have changed. And the first time you run into this, if you're doing it on an assessment, it can really catch you off guard. So this webcast is to try and shortcut some of that for you and help you run across some of these issues before you get stuck um, during an engagement. So, what are some differences here between single page web apps and traditional apps? Single page app, primarily one of the things you'll see is the entire app gets downloaded at one time. The A lot of the logic has been moved into the client, and as a result, a lot of times we're used to that occurring on the server side, and that catches us off guard. I remember sitting through a number of classes where we talk about testing and validating our logic on the server side, making sure that things aren't occurring client side that shouldn't be, or at least is being double checked by the server side. Um, and now we've moved a lot of that all up to the browser or to the client in this case. One of the things you see when we deal with single page web apps is that we are dealing a lot with API REST, primarily APIs. So you're going to see a lot of JSON requests and responses going back and forth. You're not going to see a lot of HTML coming around. And obviously, we're going to be depending heavily on JavaScript. Now, how that affects us as penetration testers or security engineers is we're used to looking at HTML, probably aren't really big into JavaScripting. At least my background as a systems administrator, coming up from that line of things, I don't have a heavy development background. And so this required a little bit of learning on my part to pick up JavaScript. Our traditional apps, we're going to be doing you're going to do a get or a post request to some web page with parameters, either with the page equals 1 and parameter equals 23, blah 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 blah, right? Maybe that'll be in the URL, maybe that'll be in the post body, but we see that happen. And then when we get back from the server, is typically going to be HTML rather than some simple API responses via JSON. And as a result, the data we're transferring, getting back from the server is quite a bit bigger. All right. Many of you may be familiar with this vulnerable web application, and there are others like it, like DVWA, but Matilliday is one that's been around for quite some time. And the idea behind Matilliday was, hey, let's give folks a chance to learn how to do web app penetration testing on applications that are not too uncommon, with vulnerabilities that have been implemented in ways that we might run into in regular applications. Now, one of the things that Matilliday does, as you can see here in this screenshot, it tells you right exactly where we're going for the issues. We want to go into SQL injection, so we select the link for that, and then, or the menu option for that, and then dives down into the different types of SQL injection that we are going to be performing. And it gives you a little bit of a page here, right? Trying to emulate something you might see in a site. But there's no real discovery. This isn't even trying to emulate a realistic application. This is just straight up, hey, here's where the vulnerability is, go. There are others like DVWA that do similar kind of thought process. Primarily, you see a lot of these vulnerable apps taking place in PHP because it's easy to install anywhere. Well, things have been changing. We don't see applications like this quite. I mean, you still see them, but not quite as much. Folks are not developing in this way because, well, it's not new, it's not sexy, and developers like working with new and interesting things. And to be honest with you, the behavior that we can get in JavaScript and single page web apps starts to look an awful lot like a thick client that we're using. It's very responsive and it's very easy and friendly to use as as the end user. Whereas a page like this, every time you click on something, the page goes blank, it downloads an entire new page, and that responsiveness drops off. So some of these vulnerable apps are showing their age a little bit here. And I went hunting around for a new application that would allow um, me to work well on my skills with maybe a little bit newer technology and a little bit more realistic type of um, uh, sorry, just being distracted by some stuff on Twitter. Looks like chat is not doing what it's supposed to. So I apologize for that. Um, so, right. So I was looking for a more realistic type of app, and I ran across this application called OWASP Juice Shop. Now, OWASP Juice Shop is written in Node.js. For the server side, it uses Express as its web server, and the front end is written in Angular. And we are dealing heavily with a REST API backend. Now, this was written by Bjorn Kiminich. I'm going to mess that name up pretty badly. He released this a couple of years back, and he put it out there as like, well, it's kind of new, it's kind of interesting. I'll try. I want to write something that is kind of fun for me to write, and that other people aren't doing. So it hadn't done yet. As a result, Juice Shop is actually the first JavaScript vulnerable web application listed on OWASP directory of vulnerable apps. So, he got this out there first. So we're going to take a look at Juice Shop here today. And I've got a couple of links here to Juice Shop. We've got the GitHub page as well as the OWASP app project page. And you can go check that out and get some information on the application itself, how to get information about it, and deploy it for your own use. And we're going to take a look at those here in just a moment. As a quick overview of Juice Shop, what does this thing look like? Well, this is basically a high-level diagram of what Bjorn put together. We've got HTML5 client written in Angular JS. It's using Bootstrap. It's got some integrations to OAuth, to Google. We've got an API happening back and forth, as well as some Socket.io traffic, talking to the Express web server. They're running inside of Node.js. From there, we've got some access to data in a SQLite database, as well as some interaction with the file system. So that's essentially what we're looking at now. We're going to be looking primarily and interacting with this, obviously, in the client level, right? And we'll be able to see the API request to Express between the client and then over to the back end. So that'll it'd be a little bit different. That's one of the things that caught me off guard the first time I got hit with an application like this, was all of a sudden, hey, there is no content and no HTML being passed back and forth. This is all an API. So this made some interesting adaptation. All right, let's go ahead and take a look, get out of PowerPoint here, and we'll take a look at some of our resources. And I'll walk through setting up Juice Shop to show you how easy that is. All right, so get out of that and go over to my handy dandy browser here. Now I'm on the OWASP project page, right? We've got some information about the project itself and how it works. One of the things that's kind of interesting about Juice Shop is that one, this is really, really easy to set up and run on your own. I was very pleasantly surprised when I ran into that. It packages everything up together. It's really easy to wipe out the database and start over again. It's actually set up, if you download their documentation, you can use this as a CTF. So you do some customization on it and it becomes a capture the flag. And so yeah, and then there's a video here of Bjorn doing the initial release back in, or an introduction rather, back in September of 2016. So if I wanted to deploy Juice Shop, how am I going to do this? Well, let's go click on our easy to install link here. It takes us to the GitHub page. So we can go ahead and pull down the code, right? Clone this. We can fork it, which is something that I did myself to set up for this. We've got a few options to set up Juice Shop. The first one is to just deploy it to Heroku. They've got a handy dandy button here to pull this off. And if you create a Heroku account, this is totally free on a free tier. And Heroku has said that they don't mind you doing this. This is fabulous as long as you are not performing denial of service attacks or doing things to try and get to the instance that's running this on Heroku, and basically being a bad neighbor, interfering with other folks who are using the service. You can also pull it down from source. I've done this both ways, where I've pulled it down from deployed directly to Heroku, or I have pulled it down via Git. So basically installed Node.js on your system, run git clone to the Git project itself, cd into the directory, you type npm install, wait a little while because there are a lot of dependencies that are going to be coming down, and then run npm start, and your application starts up on localhost port 3000. You can also deploy this as a package distribution that has all of the dependencies. Then you only have to run npm start, or you can pull it down as a Docker image. Let's go take a look at this deploy to Heroku real quick. So if I want to do this, you just click the link here. Now I'm already logged into my Heroku instance, and I just say test deployment. Has to start with a lowercase letter. Only lowercase letters in this thing. My bad. Let me fix that real quick. I tell you, yep, this name is available. This actually becomes part of your URL. It'll be test-deployment-juiceshop.herokuapp.com, and you just click deploy, and boom, this thing takes off. And you scroll down a little bit, you can actually see the build log and what's happening here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and watch this because this is going to take a little while, because there are a number of modules that we're installing. But that's all it takes to deploy this out to Heroku. All right, so what I'm going to use is a pre-deployed version of Juice Shop. I'm first off going to start up Burp. So to Sean's question earlier on via Twitter, no, we're not ditching Burp Suite. We're just we're going to use it pretty extensively, actually. So in this case, I'm just going to do a temporary project, and I'm going to go ahead and use the defaults for Burp. Let this thing start up. Okay, we've got Burp up and running. I've got Firefox over here already pointing to use Burp, and I've set up an instance already called at ps-js.herokuapp.com. Yes, this is publicly available for this webcast. It's not going to be here when we're done, though, so don't get too excited. Just deploy your own instance of it, because this won't be hanging around. All right, so I'm going to refresh my page. And we'll wait a second here. And this is where the gremlins get after you here, right? Going to take a moment here, obviously. All right, Burp is seeing the request. Things are starting to respond. Yep, here's Juice Shop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into Burp, and because we're you can see all of these different sites that Burp is seeing references to, we want to make sure that we set it up so that we have the appropriate version, or excuse me, the appropriate URL in scope. So I'm going to right click on my target site, just click add to scope. Yeah, I'm going to not log out of scope proxy traffic. And we see my scope is set up here for ps-js.herokuapp.com. So that's pretty cool. Go over to proxy, look at my history, and I'm going to go ahead and set this to only show me in scope items. That way I don't see all the keep alive stuff occurring with Firefox. All right, so let's take a look at Juice Shop. All right, we log in, or we hit Juice Shop in the first place, and we see something that looks like a quasi-realistic application. That's cool. Instead of having an app that points us out to the different vulnerabilities, we are looking at something that we'd be running into in a real world type of thing. We got our disclaimer here for compliance, right? We're going to use cookies. So do you want to accept that? Yes. Me want in, or me want it. Me want cookies. All right. So we're faced with this application here. We've got all kinds of links to different types of merchandise. We've been assigned to perform an assessment of this app. Let's take a look around here and see what we can find. So what do we have available to us? Well, I mean, I can click on a product here, right? This is kind of interesting. I can leave a review that gets displayed back to the end user. So that's cool. That's something to keep an eye on. We've got a search function. So let's search for Apple because that seems to be kind of popular here. And so we got apple juice and apple pommes, right? We've got a login page. Well, at this point, we don't have any credentials. We're a new customer. We could log in with Google, or we can create an account. We've got a forgot password function, as well as not yet a customer. Let's go ahead. We're not yet a customer, so let's go ahead and register an account. And I'm going to call this test@test.com because it really doesn't matter what we use here. Oh, we've got some validation occurring here on our password complexity. So we have to have 5 whole characters. So I'll put that together here. And our secret security question that we can't change, we'll just say, what's my mother's maiden name? Well, it was Mom, of course, right? And we'll register our account. Now let's make sure that works. We'll log in as test@test.com. Put my super secret password, all 5 characters of it, and I log in. Get some additional functionality. I can now see my basket. I can change my password. We also got the ability to hit a contact page. It looks like we can leave some ratings here, and we've got a quasi-dirty CAPTCHA recycling page where we can request things to be sent to us to recycle whatever our packaging was. We can track orders. We can make complaints. That's awesome. Look at this. We can attach files. So that come in interesting to us. And we've got an About Us section of the page with some reviews. All right, and basically what I'm doing here is I'm looking at this. We can change languages, right? We're going to stay in English with lots of sort of pseudo-Latin. But what we're doing here is we're mapping through the site. Okay, that is very similar to what we've seen before, right? But here's where it gets different. We go over into Burp, and I scroll through my content here, and we've got my initial GET request, and we've got a bunch of HTML. Okay, this is good. This is what I'm used to seeing, right? We've got a bunch of node modules getting downloaded. Now, this may not be interesting to us because the way node applications work is we install different modules to do things that we want within the app. We load them up and shove them down to the client. Now, these are just distributions from the original author of these modules. So here's the Bootstrap, for example module. We've got some Angular modules. These are going to be libraries that are pretty commonly available out there. So we have to deal with all of this JavaScript. We do have some a little bit of JavaScript, though, that is not a node module. This looks like something that would probably be written by the developer of Juice Shop itself. We've got an application configuration page, so that's kind of worth checking out. We've got our an application version, maybe interesting, maybe not. Some configuration information related to, it looks like our language, right? EN, English _ US. And so yeah, that we've started looking at some of this stuff. Now, if I was to go in and we'll go down to the bottom of the page here, here's where it gets a little different. If I say I want to see, go back over here, I want to see this product. If I went on a traditional website and I click this, what we would see is a GET request for this product, and then the HTML would come back for it. We're not seeing that here. That's because this has all occurred inside of the user interface. I clicked on this product and the data was already shoved down to the app. But there is a review on this this product here, right? There are two reviews, one that we left. And we can see that those have been uploaded to us. So we had an API request that basically said, hey, go to REST product 1, and then give me the reviews for product 1. And then we get this JSON response back. All right. So this is what I'm talking about when we see now the API starts to come into play. One of the things that I start to look at right away when I get into, and this is kind of our first little tidbit here for testing a single page web application, is the configuration information about the application. It's not unusual to see a config file or JSON config be shoved down that deals with how the application is set up. This will be back here when we initially loaded up the page. And so I'm going to look around through here and see if I can find this. Well, we've got some, this looks like some font type of stuff. We've got a socket.io request where we're getting some JavaScript related to that. This isn't going to be really what I'm looking for though in configuration. We did see this application configuration section here, right? And we've got this blob of JSON data being shoved at us. So inside of Burp, this is not the friendliest thing to read. So what I tend to do is I'll grab all of this content here, highlight it, and copy it off. And then I like to use Visual Studio Code, actually. And so I'll just create a new file and dump this. And notice it comes in, it's all on one line. And here's why I like using Visual Studio Code in part for this. There are other editors, of course, that do this. We'll say config.json, because that's what this type of data is. Now we've got our highlighting taking place. And if I use Option Shift F, all of a sudden we have everything pretty printed for me. And I can go back up here and see how this is working. Okay. So now we can see some information about the app. Well, this is running on port 3000. Looks like this is being proxied for us on Heroku because we're not accessing it via port 3000. We've got the name of the application, some configuration information about it, the Twitter URL to it, stuff like that. And we get into products. Well, products aren't terribly interesting right now, but it is kind of interesting that all of these products, when we hit this page, got shoved down to the client. That's why when I clicked on that first product, we didn't see it load up or make a request rather to the server. We already had that information here. So that's not terribly interesting, kind of, but not horribly. Let's keep looking around. Well, one of the things I noticed earlier, I commented on it briefly, is we have this juice shop, juice-shop.min.js. And we have this dump of Angular stuff here available to us. And so I'm going to copy this because this is going to be kind of the crux of this application. And this is going to vary from app to app. So this takes a little bit of getting used to as you're testing apps. But you want to look and see if you can find this type of configuration information. So we'll highlight it all, copy it. We go back over here to Visual Studio Code, create a new file. dump it out here. Again, this is all JSON primarily, so I'll save this as call this juice shop dot JSON. Okay, didn't like that very well. Spread it out over multiple lines, but it's still, this is all minimized. It's compressed up. We can't use this very well, right? So to make this visual or visible and readable to us, I'm going to go ahead and highlight again all of this and go over to this site called unminify.js. Paste all of this in here, click unminify. All right, this I can read, right? So this is useful to me. So I'll copy all of this back out. It's actually not JSON, it's JavaScript. So I've mislabeled this. So I'll close that file and try again here, right? And we'll save this as all right. Now if our highlighting occurs and we can start to make some sense of this, this is visible or understandable to us. And what we have are all of these different Angular modules that are being used. Now, one of the things that we deal with inside of Node, inside of JavaScript apps like this, is you have routes that are being defined. Think of these would be like the individual pages that we would request in a traditional web app. But instead of a page, it's a call basically to a method, and that's defined with a route. So route is kind of an important word here for us inside of our these JavaScript apps. We need to be able to find what are all of the different routes inside of the application. Now, the interesting about this is the entire application has been shoved down to our browser, right? But we may not see everything. One of the things I've seen is another configuration file that declare things like roles. You are in the customer service role, and this other person is in the administration role. And so certain things inside the application will only become visible if you have that role assigned to you, which we can mess around with as that config file gets pushed to our browser. But because we want to find all of these different pages, we have to go looking for them and see where they're at, or excuse me, all of these different functions or methods, these routes. And so let's go look for, now what I just do is I just do a search for route and go through, and here's our route provider. So second of 4 hits where route is used. And we've got some pages now here. So some of these we've seen before. We've seen the about page. We've seen the contact page. We've seen the login page, register, basket, search. That's all stuff we expect to see, log out, change password. This one right here, administration. Now that's interesting to me, right? We've got some kind of administration page, and it's referring to the view views/administration.html. What happens if I just copy /administration, go back over to my browser here, get rid of the search field, change my URL to pound, which is essentially indicating our single page app, but the administration route. All right. Congratulations. We just solved the challenge inside of Juice Shop. We can now see all of the registered users to this application, right? Here's the administrator. Here's his email address when this was created. We've got all of the comments available to us. We've got recycling requests. So typically, standard user, somebody who just came in and created an account, test@test.com, right? We shouldn't see this. But because we found it here inside of the route configuration, and we requested it, I'll go back over to my burp log here. Yeah, we're not even seeing this request for administration show up, right? Because this is all implemented client side. We saw a pull for the administrative user. All right, this is interesting. Inside of the interface, I said, hey, let me see the admin user. And it gave me just the email address, the created at date, right? I go back over to Burp and it gave me, oops, and the response, this password value here. Well, I shouldn't see that. It says we got a password hash out of this already. So that's pretty crazy. That's something to make a note of. Now, one of the things you're going to deal with, of course, is that because of browsers trying to cache things and stuff like that, we are going to see subsequent requests to this come back with, yeah, this hasn't been modified, so nothing to see here. So we want to make a note of that. This is something I would make a copy of this URL, copy of this data, and put it in my notes for my penetration test. Right. So we're seeing information being shoved back to us from the API improperly. So that's interesting. Let's go back over to our route configuration, see what else we can find here beyond administration. We've got this scoreboard page. Okay, we didn't see any links for scoreboard. So let's go check out and see what that's about. And we'll go and change administration now to score dashboard. Solved another challenge. We found the very hidden, looking in the route config, scoreboard. Now the scoreboard, this is where I think Juice Shop is really pretty cool, right? We've seen some challenges that have been solved here. They've divided these up among 6 tiers of difficulty. We have all of these different challenges. In the first tier, we find the admin section. There's a confidential document, provoke an error that isn't handled nicely, find the scoreboard, which is showing up as not finished yet, even though we're looking at the scoreboard. Let me refresh this. Maybe that'll make that pop up properly. Yep, there it is. Now it's solved, right? Do an XSS attack with this particular string. Give a 0-star feedback. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. The tier goes up. Access somebody else's basket. Find a policy or an offer from Christmas. These are all the different challenges that we have here. We get up to level 6, right? This one always makes me laugh. Access the imagine or solve the challenge 99. Unfortunately, the challenge doesn't exist. So I don't know how that one's going to work. That's something I've got to figure out still. Right. So what have we done here? We've looked at the configuration of the app and the routes. Because we saw this link to this route called scoreboard and administration, we're able to pull up information that we weren't supposed to see. So this is kind of unique to JavaScript single page apps because the entire app gets shoved down to our client. I got some other routes. We got an app for an access token. This looks like it deals with OAuth, right? We've got an access token being shoved in as part of this. And then we have this route with some obfuscated JavaScript here to hide something, to do some kind of token sale. We'll take a look at this one a little bit later. We're not going to really solve this one, but I want to point out some stuff about this and how they prompt you with some things. So we found some interesting functionality inside of the application that shouldn't be visible to us. And the only reason why it is visible to us is because of this route configuration, this configuration file here that we have for our overall application. And we've got some other insight into the code as we can, kind of go and start digging around here. We've got the calls to the REST API, right? So we could take a look at those as we go on. All right, so we've taken a look at the administration page. We've taken a look at the scoreboard. Talked about the routes that we dealt with. All right. Or looking and finding the routes, making things visible to us. Let's go back over here to our application. Actually, let's go to Burp. One of the things you may notice with Burp, in our Burp traffic, we keep seeing all of these socket requests, socket IO requests coming back and forth. So it's doing this polling with some information to this, and it comes back with 1:6, right? This isn't terribly interesting to me. One of the things you can run into is some of these these requests, polling requests coming back and forth can get in the way when we'll start intercepting traffic. So that's something to keep our eye on. All right, here is one thing that is majorly different in single page or JavaScript applications than what we're used to inside of um, regular apps. Inside of regular apps, how do we track our sessions? Well, if you said cookie, right, that's correct. But let me do this. All the way down here at the bottom of my burp history, I'm going to go back to the application. I'm going to log out. Make a request. I'm going to do a full refresh here of the page. Cause everything to reload. To do that get request, and all we see here is an unauthenticated user. We've got this cookie assigned to us, right? We've consented to allow cookies, and we've got a continue code cookie being assigned to us so that actually we could leave and come back and pick up on the challenges and where we were at. If I go to log in, let's see how this changes things. Test.com, we log in, go back to our burp information. Let's find that login request. Okay, there's our post request for that login, right? I sent over my credentials, test@test.com, my super secret password of test1. Isn't that fabulous? And we get this authentication token that comes back. And now on every subsequent request, we have this authorization header that is occurring. And we've got this long conglomeration of obscure looking code here or text. And it's also been assigned actually as a cookie. Turns out this is called a JSON web token. And we're going to talk a little about JSON web tokens because this is something you're going to see inside of these apps. And they are a little odd when you first run into them. I got fortunate when my introduction to them actually came in through an architecture review I was doing rather than a penetration test. And so I got a little bit of some reading up ahead of time on that before I actually had to deal with it inside of a penetration test. So what is a JSON web token, or JWT is what they call it? Well, the idea here is that one of the problems we deal with inside of web applications is we have to manage state. And what JSON Web Token was partially designed to kind of replace a cookie. We have this way of storing data about the user or their session and stuff like that and passing it down to the browser. And then it comes back on subsequent requests. And that way, whatever web server gets this request can look at the JWT and see what is the deal with this person. Are they a valid user? Are they authenticated to the site? What's some information about them? You can kind of compare this to maybe the view state in some ways in ASP.NET applications. They can be transmitted and stored in cookies, but because we can push all this data to them, it's tempting to store too much data beyond the storage limits of a cookie. So they can also be stored inside of browser local storage and come across via HTTP headers. Some of the things that's handy about using this as an authorization header, as well as we don't have domain restrictions around the cookie. For the developers, that can be useful. For the security folks, that can be a little bit worrying because here is this token, right, that controls all of our that controls our session, right, describes us as a user being authenticated to it. And now domain restriction controls or put on cookies go out the window. So that's a little bit of a concern, something we got to keep in mind. Things to look inside of JWTs. Sensitive data. Where is the cookie stored? How long is the expiration time? Is the signature actually validated? We'll take a look at this in just a second. um, and some tools to deal with that. So sensitive data, we've been saying for years, right, in web app security, do not store sensitive data in the cookie. Well, now we came up with JWTs and we said, hey, now we can put data into the cookies after all. And this is by design, and this is how we manage states. And people get tempted again to shove data that shouldn't be there inside of the token. Where is the token stored? Is it stored as a cookie, or is it stored in the browser local storage? If it's stored inside of local storage, then it becomes uh, possible via cross-site scripting attack to pull that out of local storage and send it to the attacker. Whereas if it was in a cookie and the secure flag was set, um, the JavaScript wouldn't be able to access that. Wouldn't be able to access that cookie. But now, if it's in local storage, it's fair game um, for cross-site scripting. And always inside of these applications, there's are things being validated on the server side. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at a couple of resources available to us to deal with JWTs. So one that I like immediately is a Burp extension. So if we go under Extender and go to the Burp App Store, and we can scroll down and we find JSON Web Token Attacker is one that I've installed. I'm still tinkering with this one. I haven't really gotten a feel for this yet, so I'm not going to talk about it today. But JSON Web Tokens is an extension that can be really useful to us. So I've installed that here, and as you see, I've got this tab when I start it that allows me to decode the the JWT. So let's go back to my proxy. And you see here on the comments, right, this contains a JWT. So the Burp is telling us through the extension, hey, we've got something here. So let me right click on this and should be able to, I thought I could send this directly over to okay, I thought I could just do a send over to, oh yeah, there it is. Send selected text to JSON Web Tokens tab to decode. Click that link. And here is all of that encoded text, right? And then Burp, this extension, decodes it for me. And there are 3 parts to a JSON Web Token. Let me pull up a page that maybe makes this a little bit more visible. This is jwt.io, where they explain the library and how it works. There are 3 sections to a JWT. You have the first part here. This is the header. This gives us the algorithm that was used to sign it, or to create it rather, and what type of token is this. We've got the payload down here, or as I've been calling it, the body. This is just base 64 encoded text. So if I was to copy all of this, right, and go over back to Burp, over decoder, right, code as base 64. It's a JSON dump of JSON data, right? All right, we have our payload data. This is what this decodes out to. All right, who sees some potential issues here with our payload? Is there any sensitive data inside of this? Right? So yeah, absolutely. We've got the password sitting in here. That's no good. We've got some information about the user. Our ID is 9. Here's our email address. When was the account created at? When was it last updated at? All right. And then when was this token issued at? That's what IAT stands for. And you can see, maybe you can read this. It says issued at second since Unix epoch. And when does it expire? And then down here at the bottom is our signature, right? So basically we've got this RSA SHA-256 signature that's been created. There is actually a secret key on the server side that generates the signature. So what that means is I can't come in here and change this to admin, for example, because the signature will fail. If the application is validating the signature like it should, it'll bounce on us. All right, if I go back over to JSON Web Tokens here, it makes it really easy to analyze this. We can see where it, when this expires at. Now this is in UTC time, so it's 23:39:03 today, but I can see when it was issued at 18:39:03. So we got an expiration time here of about 5 hours, it looks like, from the issue time to when this token expires. So that's not necessarily too bad for a site like this, but that your mileage may vary. All right, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to try and crank through a couple of things here really fast. Apologize, it went a little longer than I expected. All right. So one of the things I wanted to point out here inside of this application is we're looking at vulnerabilities, and we've got sensitive data here. We've got this hash. Well, what is this hash? Well, if I go down here, let's copy this off and just do a Google search for it. Well, look, there's a result for this particular hash. We click on it. The original value was test1. Well, we saw that in my login request. Um, so we've got a problem here. We're using MD5s for password hashing. That's insecure. We can do a quick Google search on it. We're exposing this to the user or to users, right? Because the API is sending that information back and forth to us. We've discovered a number of vulnerabilities here all at once, just by looking at this JWT, this token here, and looking at the REST API. All right, so I want to do a couple of challenges here really quick and take a look really at the API and how that works. Because that's really our next piece of testing these type of applications. We've got to test the API, and the client is where we're going to see that interaction happen as we do things like add something to the cart. So I've added this product to the cart. I go over to my burp history, and we can see I have made a post to my basket. We did a get to see what my basket was, and we did a post to say, hey, we're adding one of this ID 20 product ID 23 to the basket number 5. And we get a response back saying, hey, that's lovely. It was successful. So we're going to, that's something we need to deal with. We see that the API, how this is working. Well, if I see basket 5, REST API basket 5, let's send this over to repeater. And let's change this to basket 2 and hit go. Well, I just accessed somebody else's basket. I can see what they have inside their cart for checkout. That's a problem. There's no validation to say, hey, this user with this, that we have here in this token, it actually should have access to basket number 2. We should only have access to basket number 5. So we've got authorization checks failing. This should come back as a failure, access denied. Instead, we get a success. So there's yet another vulnerability with this application. And we can see now that the Juice Shop has recorded this. One thing that can be fun to do, retail sites, the reviews are a big deal, right? So if we go over to About Us, we've got this feedback. And so here's this really positive review saying 5-star review. We absolutely love them. Best shop in town, right? So let's see if we can mess around with this, because it could really wreck a company. And this is probably where we're going to wrap it up. I'll do some subsequent videos on testing Juice Shop in the future here, I think, because there's some other things I wanted to get to. But how do we leave feedback here? Well, we saw that if I go to contact us, I could leave feedback. So I'm just going to leave some test feedback. Hi, I'm here. We'll give it a 2-star review. We've got this low-tech CAPTCHA here. 4 minus 5 is -1, minus 5 is a -6. Hit submit. Thank you for your feedback. Let's go over to Burp. Here's our post request. We can send that off to repeater and mess around with this a little bit, maybe. One of the things that the app required you to do was submit a rating, you had to click a star, right? Well, what happens if I change this to 0 and hit go? Accepted it. We just left a 0-star review on the site. Let's go see here. If I went to that get request for feedback, let's go over to that About Us page again. To force a full refresh. We don't want this. I want to see what this is. This API request has given us back. Okay, so the API comes back and tells us, okay, yep, here is all of the feedback. I'm going to copy this off so I can see it. Go back over to Visual Studio Code. Let's save this as feedback. Option Shift F. All right, this is readable for me, right? We've got this feedback. This was our original. I love this shop. Best products in town. Highly recommended, right? Gave them a rating of 5 and when it was created at. So I made this repeater request over here. Gave me back an ID, right? Let's see here. Well, let's send this to repeater. So I made the request here for all of the feedbacks, right? So we'll send this over to repeater. Let it go. That's fabulous. Well, what happens if I do ID 1? Because this is a REST feedback. So we have kind of the path, the method being called. Let's go for the individual resource. If I select just one, then I just get the feedback for one. So that's cool. Let's go over to our previous tab where we left some feedback here. I'm going to copy this off. And one of the things we deal with REST APIs, we have different verbs available to us. We've got get, we've got post, right? Put, and delete. So put is typically what happens when we're doing an update. So let's go ahead and maybe change this a little bit. Let's see. Actually, I'm just going to grab this bit of script right here. JSON text here. The ID is 1. We've got our comment, right? The rating is 5 when it was created at, all this lovely stuff. Well, I want to mess around with this. We're going to update ID 1. We're going to do a put on it. And we're going to say, I hate this shop. Awful products. Highly not recommended. And we'll leave a feedback of 1. Now, if you remember over here inside of our page, right, this is our feedback. I love this shop, best products in town. Go over here to repeater and I hit go. And we get back a success message. So let's see what happened here inside of our site. Do a refresh on this page. Oops, wrong key. All right, that didn't work. Live demo fail. Put put the feedback. Probably have to mess around with some stuff here. So let's get rid of, how did I format this when this came in? So the user ID and the comment, the CAPTCHA, and that was it. Huh? So let's change this. We'll get rid of the created at. We'll get rid of this ID because we already actually have this. No, okay, so it comes back successful, but it's leaving it in here. probably due to our CAPTCHA. So let's copy this out from a good request. So yeah, we had a CAPTCHA in here and we used it and it was fabulous and all that other good stuff, right? Oops, not two period or commas. Do a refresh again. All right, demo is failing here. That's fabulous. Put API feedback 1, change the rating 1, da da da. So just kind of keep messing with this here and see what we can get. Oh, didn't like patch. All right, demo fail on my part. To heck with it, I'm done with it. Let's just delete this feedback entirely. Hit go. See if this works. It caused a bad error. All right, well, it looks like this isn't working for me. I'm messing this up. So live demo fail. I thought I did this right the other night when I was practicing this last night. But this is the kind of the process we go through with messing around with these type of applications. One thing I did want to point out, the scoreboard, once we see it, becomes visible to us, and I wanted to show you how the feedback worked here. Um, if I wanted to, let's see, there was one of the challenges I want to show. Yeah, here it is. Learn about a token sale before it's announced. So it's unsolved. If I click on this, it actually gives me some help, but it doesn't give it away to you, right? So it gives some information about this to you, that of what's happening here. Tells you you're not going to be able to brute force this URL. It's probably not going to happen. Go investigate where the paths, the routes basically are defined, and messing around with it. Beating the obfuscation mechanism is going to take some time. So let's go over here, and if we go back over to our Juice Shop JavaScript file, this is actually where this comes into play. So maybe what I could do instead would be to just, instead of mess around with this as the juiceshop.min is pushed back to me, I'll just edit this and change it to token sale. So let's try that. I haven't tried this before, so let's do that for grins. So I'm going to go over here to Juice Shop. Again, I'm going to do a full refresh of the page. And the first thing I'm going to do is go over my proxy and say, oops, turn on intercept, force a refresh. Nothing's happening because it's waiting. And so we're going to forward this on until these are where these socket IOs are coming in. So we need to avoid those. And we're going to see a bunch of those. And I'm looking for that request for juice shop.min.js. So we're just have to keep scrolling through this. Did it not come back, or did I pass it up? I pass it up. Let's try it again. All right, I'm demo failing all over the place for trying something hot. Basically, what happened is if I caught this and intercepted it properly, I could just edit this inside of the application, or as it was pushing it back down to the application, and change the route. let's say to something like token sale. And we'll get rid of all of this here, this obfuscated type of thing. And if I caught that, intercepted as it went back to my browser, then I could just access token sale and the client would render it to me and we'd be able to access the token sale. All right, folks, we're out of time. It is 1:02. So I'm going to do some follow-up videos on this, on some of the individual challenges. Hopefully this was useful and informative to you guys. I tried to give you a little bit of a taste of what happens when we test JavaScript single page applications. The key points here are to look for things like the JWTs, look for issues, things like the API request coming down. You're going to see a huge amount of data being pushed to the client. So you're going to have to look at the code and inspect that to figure out where the content is and determine whether or not you can access it. Look for those configurations around roles, any type of permissions or whatever that your account may have. You want to look and see if you can mess around with that. Keep in mind, we've gone from this model of all of this logic occurring on the server side and being shoved up into the client. And hopefully they're still doing validation on the server side, but we saw some instances here inside of Juice Shop where that isn't occurring. It's not unusual for me to see apps that they do that validation pretty good, maybe throughout the app, but there'll be several places where they miss it. The chat is moving a little bit slow here. I'll stay in and monitor this for a little bit inside of the Hangout. But if you have any questions, just shoot me an email, jason@paladinsec.com. I appreciate you hanging out and watching the webcast. I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to talking to you all in the future. Thank you very much.